So, we have some really important news that just came out a couple of hours ago. And unfortunately for Libs, this is going to add to the already massively growing pile of losses that they have had to endure since Trump took office. And it's just another huge win for Trump and anybody that can see the politicization of the law from 1,000 miles away. Now, in case you missed it, the $500 million civil fraud penalty against Donald Trump that was issued by Leticia, I'm going to get Trump James, and Judge Look at My Nipples Engoron, it has just been tossed out by the New York Appeals Court. They basically took one look at this thing and said, "Are you insane? Like, is this a joke?" To top it off, the person who brought the case against Trump, Leticia James, she's the one that's under a legitimate investigation for her own financial crimes. You know, the kind that she accused Trump of, but maybe actually guilty of herself on a felony level, because that is how the left works. Every single thing they accuse the right of, every single thing they are guilty of, at least 100 times worse. And they are the party of projection. So that is the lens through which you have to look and hear everything that they say and do, and everything that they accuse us of, and everything that they label us of. It is a projection of who they are and what they do constantly. So we're going to get into what was just announced and how this all came about, and pretty much how this is a win and how we can, just stack this up on top of the pile of wins that we have accumulated over the last few months. But before we get too much further, I'm Outspoken Samantha, and I would love it if you would hit the thumbs up button on this video and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. I appreciate you so much for doing both of those things. So, yes, as I said, this penalty, this massive fine is being tossed out. But just to recap, we need to reminisce about the last few years just for a second so we can understand how we got here. Now, back in 2022, Leticia Tish James sued Donald Trump, his business, his sons, and a few executives. So I guess we can give her credit for not separating families. She claimed that Trump inflated his property values, tripled his penthouse size, and had Mar-a-Lago valued like a mega mansion instead of a social club. And this was in order to secure better loans and insurance terms for himself. Now, this led to a 3-month trial where Judge Engoron, who hates Trump as much as Leticia James does, and therefore had absolutely no problem going along with her political games, hit Trump with this $354 million fine disgorgement plus interest, pushing the grand total of what they claim Trump owes to the state of New York to the $500 million mark. Now, by the time Trump got around to appealing this garbage case, the amount was up to over the $500 million with interest. And Trump was on the hook for about 98% of that burden. And the judge in this case tried to appeal to all of our heartstrings and really think that he was fighting for justice. He used some major buzzwords like calling it pathological and a shock to the conscience. However, just as a side note, if we really want to talk about a shock to the conscience, this is the same judge who repeatedly posted half naked photos of himself on a high school alumni newsletter that he himself was in charge of. And again, this is just another example of Democrats exposing exactly who they are with what they accuse Trump of. Their behavior is definitely pathological and shocking to the conscience, and it's not even up for debate. And just for reference, how exactly did they come up with this astronomical amount to fine Trump with? Well, as I said, Engoron ordered disgorgement, the state claiming ill-gotten gains of about $354 million based on inflated values, and then, of course, add the years of interest. So basically, it sounds like they just pulled numbers out of their butts and tried to bankrupt this man, because as the New York Appeals Court is confirming, this amount was astronomically excessive. It was completely unnecessary. It was far above what was needed if they actually needed to hold Trump accountable for the things that they were accusing him of. If he had actually been guilty, this fine still was way too much. And it seems to confirm what Trump's team and anybody with two brain cells could see, which was that this was entirely politically motivated and a couple of Trump haters who were just abusing their power and twisting the law against someone because they disagreed with their politics, which is Of course, as we all know, a component of fascism. Because as we are all aware by now, Attorney General Leticia James literally campaigned on getting Trump. Not about pointing out a specific crime, but to look at this man that she wanted to take down and gain votes based on the promise that she would use her power to go after him and find something to find him guilty of.
Because we know here in New York, a man who succeeds by tearing others down, who gets rich off the backs of others, whose hateful rhetoric is poisoning our democracy, stands as an affront to all that I believe in and all that this country and state represents.
She wasn't talking about getting in there and reducing crime on subways or protecting New Yorkers from violence, as this post said, and addressing any of the major issues that affect New Yorkers on a daily basis and that they are begging for corrections on. Her platform was, I need to go after Trump. And unfortunately, as much as those of us with common sense would like to think that that kind of a platform would not be successful, there are far too many people who it does resonate with. And this is something that Gavin Newsom is doing. He is just running on not being Trump. And I have seen far too many videos on TikTok of liberals applauding that approach. So, unfortunately, this kind of thing does work. But when it comes to the actual law, it's not going to hold up for very long. What we're having confirmed now, because we knew this was happening all along, was that her handling of this case was a violation of the Eighth Amendment, ignoring the evidence that proved his innocence and twisting the case every which way so that she could get a guilty verdict. So she is basically exactly the person that Democrat protesters are describing on their poster boards as they use crayons to scribble the words fascist and no kings. Leticia James and Judge Engoron are those people. Let's get to what the announcement on this case was, as I said, just a couple of hours ago.
Fox News alert, a New York appeals court just this morning has thrown out President Donald Trump's massive civil fraud penalty. The decision from a five-panel group in New York's appellate division changed the original decision that stood to cost Trump over $500 million. One appeals judge calling the lower court's penalty an excessive fine that violates the Eighth Amendment of the United States Constitution. You might remember that New York Attorney General Leticia James' office says despite this decision, they will not be dropping the case.
Yes, as is consistent with the Democrat approach to anything, it's not to back off when they legitimately, overwhelmingly fail. It is to double down because they can never, ever admit their own abuses of power, their own violation of the Constitution, and just ultimately how they themselves, as I said, are exactly the people that they accuse Trump of being. So they can never admit that. So, of course, they're going to keep pushing this thing forward. Now, I did find this clip on CNN of everybody talking about this announcement, and they all look like they are having the worst day of their life. They're like, how many more wins do we need to keep reporting on? Like, why do we keep needing to share this? I mean, they hate this, but it is what it is. We saw this coming. We knew that this was crap from the beginning. And so they're not only talking about how this is a win for Trump, but how this really makes Attorney General James look terrible.
Well, I have been skeptical of the Attorney General's case for a long time. I'm on record saying that this is a huge win for Donald Trump, any way you cut it. And this is a stinging rebuke to the Attorney General, Leticia James. The finding here, it's a very long, complicated ruling, but the bottom line is, while the finding of liability against Donald Trump can stand, for now at least, the damages award, which started at $350 million with interest, gets up close to $500 million, that is thrown out. And the core reason for that ruling, according to the judges, is essentially that there was not enough of a showing here that there were actual victims. And just to refresh people's memories, this is the civil fraud lawsuit brought by the Attorney General. The core allegation is that Donald Trump habitually overvalued his own assets when he was trying to get bank loans from banks and other lenders. And essentially, the argument that Donald Trump made below that has now had resonance in the appeals court is you're talking about very sophisticated, quote unquote, victims. These are billion-dollar banks that made the loans, got repaid on the loans by Donald Trump with interest, and actually profited to the tune of millions of dollars. So it's not the typical type of fraud case where you have somebody stealing money from other people or ripping off unknowing consumers.
And I believe that Leticia James has made the argument that these are unfair practices, and it's meant to pretty much keep it from happening to anybody who might not be as lucky as Trump to be able to pay these things back or whatever else. But if you want to make an example of somebody, you might want to find somebody who has actually scammed the system, not somebody who may be engaged in this behavior, but there's no victims. Nobody is saying that they got ripped off. Like, there was no crime committed here. And I do remember after this case started and after the verdict was read and they were trying to penalize Trump, there were all of these people coming out that engage in the same kind of investments and practices that he does in New York City, saying, this is common. This is what we all do. So if you're going to penalize him, you're going to penalize all of us. And therefore, we are not going to continue to do business in New York. So we know that that was just a long list of excuses to justify what they were doing. Ultimately, this was about going after Trump. Period. The end. It's not even up for debate. Fortunately for Leticia James, she may not have a whole lot of time to worry about what's going on with this case because she's under investigation herself for actually committing financial crimes.
As for James, if we apply the Leticia James standard that she created, there'd be little question here. This seems pretty straightforward. What the administration is saying is this was not her principal residence. In fact, as a New York elected official, she had to say that her principal residence was in New York. This was an out-of-state residence. But also, they claim that in some of these forms, she actually states that her father is her husband in order to file as a married couple. So there's a lot of those questions. And as you know, the Supreme Court just stated earlier in March in a case called Thompson that they want to see knowing false statements under sections like 1014, not just misleading statements. These are misleading statements. Either it's your principal residence or it's not.
So, yeah, it seems like she's going to have her hands full and maybe handcuffed very soon if we're lucky. But there should be no objection to this investigation because if we are all about the law and order, then she should be looked into and held accountable if the evidence shows that she is guilty. We don't want anybody to bend the rules. We don't want anybody to mislead the jury. We don't want anybody to go out of their way to find her guilty of something, even though she seems to be a dirty, rotten crook, in my opinion. We don't want her to be prosecuted because of her politics. We want her to be prosecuted because she's a criminal, allegedly. Anyway, it goes without saying, we all knew that this was going to happen because we knew that this case was crap. Not because we support Trump, but because everything pointed to this being politically motivated. And I know that unhinged liberals like to pretend that we base our opinions on things purely based on political alignment because that's exactly what they do. And they have to make themselves feel better about politicizing everything. And they do that by telling themselves that we're exactly the same as they are. But the truth is, we don't do that. Regardless of your politics, your gender, your sexuality, your race, your religion, whatever it is, if you commit a crime, you should be held accountable. If you are innocent, then you shouldn't have anything to worry about. But they have created a system where if you are President Trump or you support him or you just don't align with them in general, then they should be able to go after you and find a reason to put you in jail because of your politics, because they are the authoritarian dictator fascists. I would love to hear all of your thoughts on this in the comments below. Please, again, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I just want to make a note. I know that the sound on my mic is not great. For those of you who don't know, my family and I moved recently, and I think my mic may have gotten damaged in the move. So as soon as I can afford a new one, I will purchase it. Thank you for your patience. Other than that, keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one.